Hello, everybody, and welcome to our panel connecting the frontline to the boardroom. Continuing today's theme of decision-ready risk, I'm delighted to welcome 4 senior-level executives to the panel. Our panelists will share insights, approaches, and real-life examples of how they're navigating today's complex and fast-changing risk environment and connecting what's happening at the front line of their businesses to the boardroom. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to those of you at home joining. Before we delve into this fascinating discussion, it'd be really great to hear from each of you who you are, your role, a little bit about your organization. And I'm also really keen to know what sort of pressures you're facing today in your risk environment. Could we kick off with you, Murty?
Thanks a lot, Catherine. I'm Murty Chirawuri, Chief Risk and Compliance Officer for Europe Assistance Australia New Zealand. We are a travel insurer and fairly new to the Australian landscape. Our key area of challenge at the moment, as we are getting our license from the regulator, is to demonstrate that our risks and regulations are being met, our risks are being managed and operating effectively. So in that sense, I think we feel the largest pressure of the regulatory burden, or debt, as they call it, and it's been an absolute joyride.
Interested to hear more later in the discussion. Thanks, Murty. Elise, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Catherine, and hello, everyone. My name is Elise Taylor, and I'm the General Manager of Strategy and Risk for Cerebral Palsy Alliance. Cerebral Palsy Alliance is the oldest charity in the world that started to support people with cerebral palsy or similar conditions in 1945. So we're actually celebrating our 80th anniversary this year. We have 5 main programs as an organisation. Our direct service delivery is our largest program. We support about 4,000 people living with disability in New South Wales and the ACT, and that's supported by approximately 3,500 employees. And then we have our what we call our global program. So we have a global research institute, a global technology accelerator, an global advocacy for disability, and a growing education and capacity building program. And those programs combined touch and reach over 20 million people across the world every year. So it's quite a dynamic environment with a few moving parts. And if I was to say, you know, what are the sort of biggest sort of issues for us in the risk space, I'm sure it's no surprise to people that in 2013, we started the National Disability Insurance Scheme. That has been a major change to the operating environment and the operating model for our organisation. And whilst we're sort of 12 years in, it's still quite significant transformation for not only government, but for the sector. So that would be kind of the biggest area for us. But alongside that, we also had a new regulator commence who has brought in national regulation, national standards for disability care. So many people are quite shocked when they learned that there was no national standards for disability care before 2018. So that's been incredibly welcomed, I believe, for supporting people. But it comes again with the regulatory burden that Murty was referring to, and needing to transform your organisation to ensure that we're meeting those standards effectively. So they'd be 2 of the biggest. I mean, I think the other probably is a financial kind of sustainability risk for many organisations in our sector. Many are closing, changing hands, merging. So happy to sort of speak to that environment if it's helpful as well.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about that later. It sounds like a very complex, sort of multifaceted environment that you're working in, but extremely valuable. So wonderful to hear. Thanks, Elise. Angela, would you like to go next?
Sure, happy to. So I'm Angela Seidel, and I'm Group Manager for Risk and Internal Audit for Hunter Water, which provides water, sewage, etc. for our customers here in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales. So one of the challenges that we're facing is obviously assets have a long lifetime, but they do need to be replaced. And they're very expensive replacement programs. So we're very mindful of the cost of living pressures that our customers are undergoing and trying to get that balance right with our community as to what they can afford for us to spend, but also needing to take other community perspectives into account, for example, our sustainability journey, and also considering the regulator as well and their requirements. So it's quite a balancing act, and certainly looking forward to hearing how others are also managing that.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, really keen to hear a little bit more about the community involvement, because I hear at Hunter Water there's quite a lot of participation. And last but not least, Antal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Catherine. Hello, everyone. I'm Antal Shaheen, Chief Risk Officer of Police Bank. Police Bank is a customer-owned bank, so our purpose is different to shareholder-owned institutions. We were formed in 1964 by a group of police officers looking to provide financial services for their peers. Through evolution, we've grown over to serve 75,000 members, and now look at the New South Wales, Tasmanian and federal police forces, as well as Border Force. We work hard to support our core bond members, better interest rates, tailored services and tailored products. As CRO, I'm responsible for the bank's enterprise risk management, compliance, operational risk environments. Work closely with the board and executive teams. And Catherine, some of those challenges I think that my peers on this panel have discussed are not too different to some of the ones we face in banking. I suppose for mutual banks specifically, some challenge around remaining competitive, keeping up with regulatory burden, maintaining that member trust. So we are heavily reliant on third parties and always balancing cost pressures and things like that. So look forward to talking about it more throughout.
Excellent. Thanks, Anton. We look forward to hearing about that. Yeah. So I'd like to just jump back to yourself, Murty, now. So you mentioned it's been a joyride at Europe Assistance. Could you tell us a little bit more about how governance, risk and compliance is positioned within your organisation and what you're referring to with that joyride journey?
Yeah, it's been it's been a great pleasure building the complete risk and compliance footprint for the organization from the ground up in Australia. But we also have, as part of the general, we have a very robust global footprint. So therefore, there are two sides. One is the local regulation and how we meet them. And there's also the global regulation in Europe and otherwise that we have to comply with. So what I mean by a joyride is the ability to meld those two viewpoints between a European regulatory expectation and a local regulatory expectation, and to find the common ground where we can meet both, yet at the same time have an efficient structure so that we support our businesses locally. So to that extent, I think the governance has been very effectively set up. And I think from a regulatory standpoint, it is how we create a platform so that the pathways of governance are seamless through, and we can escalate appropriately. So that I think is the trick at the moment with interconnectedness of our risks and regulations, is how we have a clear pathway from the time we identify an aspect or an event or a risk to the place of a decision making through management onto information to the governance. That's the roller coaster that we have to connect.
Yeah. Elise, at CPA, would you say with your sort of global arm, with research and other things that your organization is doing, do you have similar sort of pressures, or have you had a similar journey?
Yeah, I mean, yes, probably not to the same degree that Murty's speaking to in terms of the obligations for the insurance agency. I mean, our governance is primarily focused on sort of our national program, because that's where most of our kind of direct risk and regulation sits. But in saying that, as our global programs start to grow and become more successful, we are definitely needing to understand regulation for fundraising in different environments, for conducting research in different environments, and certainly other sort of commercial technology startup environments. So it is becoming an increasing part of our business, but it's probably what I would say sort of the emerging area of growth for us. And 80% of our effort would still be sitting with the risk associated with direct service delivery to very vulnerable people who have very complex support needs. So it's certainly weighted more heavily to that sort of national context.
Okay. Brilliant. And Angela, at Hunter Water, could you tell us a little bit about how things are positioned within your organization?
Sure. So obviously from a governance perspective, we've got a great team that balances the New South Wales government requirements versus the various regulatory organisations that operate in our space as well. So it is, and we're a state-owned corporation, so we operate a little bit more like a company rather than a true government department as such. So it is doing that balance and also taking into account IPART, who determine our pricing structure that we're allowed to charge our customers on a 5-yearly basis. So it is being receptive and keeping relationships so that we can understand the requirements across all bodies.
Excellent, thank you. And so is there anything sort of within Police Bank that you can resonate or relate to in this conversation?
Yeah, look, I think from our perspective, as I said, we are a member-owned bank. So our customers and members are at the heart of everything we do, and especially more obviously Police Bank with our core bond. So it's really around understanding that niche, how police and associated services operate, and tailoring our services to them. What we need to be mindful, obviously, is regulation, because regulators like APRA. So we obviously need to make sure that we've got one eye on the regulator, but really trying to serve our customers. Typical things like I was sharing stories where detectives go undercover for 6 months straight. So they vanish pretty much. So how do we serve those customers through banking, loans, and things like that? So I think, generally speaking, though, we're in a good position and staying abreast of regulatory change, being relevant to customers, protecting them, but also, serving their true needs.
Excellent. Such a fine balancing act. Brilliant. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about the landscape that you're working in and your organizations. It's really good to just get a flavor of what's happening in your world, and also for the audience at home. And welcome to those that have joined us online today. So reflecting on the last few years, we touched on it a little bit, but I'd just like to delve a little bit deeper on some of the sort of shifts and changes within your organization. So regulations, for example, has come up already within this conversation. I'm curious to know, particularly, I'm going to ask this one to Angela. Has there been any particular events or disruptions in your industry that has sort of reshaped the way that you do things at Hunter Water?
Look, I think we obviously consider external regulations. So if we look at the various sustainability pieces that are definitely impacting us, we have local insights that our customers are telling us about. So, and of course we have the traditional ones, so the EPA, etc., who obviously we need to continue a good relationship with as we work through it. So, and then there are ones that are on the horizon that we need to be considering, but may not be directly impacting us at the moment. So it's keeping, if you look at SOCI, for example, so SOCI is definitely here and now, but there are continual changes as we're going forward with that, as the Department of Home Affairs works through their expectations. So I think, there's certainly a changing landscape going forward, and that's just the world we live in from a risk perspective. So we'll forever need to be agile.
Absolutely, it's constantly evolving and changing. Would anybody else like to share a little bit more about what's happening in your particular space?
I'd be happy to,
Okay.
Catherine.
Thanks, Elise.
Sorry, Bernie. I guess sort of following on from what I sort of shared in the introduction, an absolute catalyst for our organisation, particularly in the sort of governance, risk and compliance space, was definitely the new national regulator who commenced in 2018 and really brought those national standards and national regulation to the landscape, which was a tremendous milestone, particularly for the safeguarding of people with quite significant disability. But that certainly came with a lot for us as an organisation to be thinking about in the GRC space. I think it's fair to say, assessed our maturity in terms of risk and enterprise risk management. Our maturity was pretty low at that point. I'm happy to share that. And so that took us on quite an important journey that we're still on. And happy to speak to that journey if any of that's helpful. But based on that maturity assessment, we've really carved out a clear plan to move away from what was pretty immature, segregated kind of risk management into a very sort of hopefully maturer, I would like to say, integrated enterprise with strong digital communication between the frontline and head office, with some really fantastic sophisticated systems that support us now. But we literally started with a spreadsheet and now are using sort of three main systems to support us in the GRC space. So happy to speak to any of that if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. We'll talk a little bit more about sort of the transformation journeys. So yeah, we're really keen to hear about those sort of legacy systems and where you are today. Meti, I just wanted to jump over to yourself for a moment. Within Europe Assistance, have you had a similar experience? Have risks become more interconnected within your organization, or sort of separate?
Absolutely. So I think we understanding risk both as a cause and response. So from a cause perspective, we are seeing risks emanate at an intersection between technology, geopolitics, data sovereignty, and possibly our supply chains. So between these four, and we see this being represented by regulation as well. So the new standards and operational risk management that's come through for us also talks pretty much in light of these 4 or 5 areas. And it's rather than in the area itself, it's the gap between them where the risks emanate much more than just in the main cause of op risk or enterprise risk. So that's the cause end. And from a response, we've seen both ourselves interconnecting risks, but the regulators expecting that and the governance bodies expecting that we respond more by understanding the root causes of these risks, the causes, and also trying to figure out on a scenario base, as in more like a what if I can call it that, to say how do these events cause multiple risks and what is the interconnectedness between them, and then how are we responding to multiple drivers. So I think we have gone away from the old structures of static dashboards and structured approaches where you had a single control to a single risk kind of linkage to a more interconnected world. Although this does not say that structures are not important, it's about how they start getting used. And that's where I think platforms and technology comes into play, which helps assist in building those interconnectedness.
Right. So Murty has touched on sort of the technological change within his organization, and also how reporting is becoming less static. At Police Bank, Antar, has that also influenced the way that you do reporting or your board level expectations of what they're expecting to see?
Absolutely, Catherine. So today boards are asking more probing and forward-looking questions. So in terms of reporting in our board packs, we certainly need to be mindful of what we are providing, the insights we're providing, really transitioning away from bulk information just for the sake of it. So really to support our board and their roles and their functions, providing them the right guidance for them to be able to make confident decisions.
Excellent. Thank you. And Angela, Elise mentioned at CPA how they've become more of a mature organisation and how their risk appetite has changed. Has that been a similar experience at Hunter Water?
Look, our board reviews their risk appetite every year, and takes many things into consideration. I think one of the things that, as part of our journey, we've been able to, Elise did mention starting with a spreadsheet. We too started with a spreadsheet, and and actually bringing the story together so that the board can consider that in a more fulsome position for them. So, and we enjoy being able to provide that information on a more frequent basis, so they are more easily informed. So that is definitely an improvement to assist them with their risk appetites.
Thank you. Annalise, back to your comment earlier about the legacy systems and how you were managing risk previously with spreadsheets. Was there a particular moment where you needed to make that change, or was it sort of an organic thing?
Yeah, no, it definitely kicked off around sort of 2018, 2019 when the announcement that the new regulator was coming. I guess I was asked, and I worked with a number of subject matter experts in the organisation, and we really wanted to have a look at how resilient were we, where were our strengths in risk and compliance, where did we have weaknesses or things that we felt really we needed to lean into. So we did a really good analysis of that, and then sort of started to plan out how we might sort of manage that over time. And so, particularly, for our organisation, and I think it's fair to say for our board, the safeguarding of clients and the safety of our workers would be absolutely paramount, and the most important thing for us to ensure. So through that lens, and I think Anchor had already sort of shared, that sort of very person-centered, client-centered lens, it tends to drive your business and drives your effort and your resources, and so certainly since that time we've reviewed policy, we've reviewed practice, we've reviewed governance, and similar to Angela, we now have a really good annual cadence of reviewing all of those processes and practices in the organisation. So yeah, it's definitely we've definitely moved away from the spreadsheet days, and we we have our frontline staff. There's kind of 3 focus areas where our frontline staff need to communicate with us at particular time frames. So it does need to be very robust and very structured to meet our regulators' requirements. So particularly for client incidents or issues, worker incidents or issues, or cyber privacy incidents or issues, they have an online form that they can fill out 24/7, and it comes through to us. And senior members of the team, we get a daily alert on anything that's of material nature in terms of an incident that's occurred. So that goes to me, the CEO, and a couple of other very senior people. So we're always across, what's happening in the organisation, and that's made an enormous difference to our ability to work in a very dynamic sort of environment.
Excellent. And react in that real time as well.
Absolutely. And some of our requirements, particularly with sort of reporting to our regulator, I'm sure as others would be familiar, we have to turn things around within 24 hours. And so, it was incumbent upon us to ensure that we had the systems to support us to actually meet those external reporting obligations as well.
Yeah.
So if you're supporting thousands of people and you need to report within a 24-hour time frame, it's impossible unless you transform the way you're working with the front line.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's an excellent point, Catherine, if I can add to Elisa's context there. And I suppose beyond the spreadsheet, we did work in silos. Risk was seen something owned by line 2. So, to produce reporting, it was a challenge. You're chasing your tail month in, month out. So I think through evolution and transitioning, we've seen a shift towards risk being everyone's business, everyone involved in the risk report. It's no longer just a line 2 sort of report, to really give those clear insights to board and executives and organisations. So, that whole piece around accountability, ownership of risk within the business, and really helping organisations become more proactive and forward-looking, I think, has really helped with, the right design with the great output around risk reporting.
Yeah.
And it's so true, because the flip side of having those great structures and systems is that you now have data that you never actually had your hands on before, that can start to help you with that future predictive analytics that you just didn't have the capability. And so particularly for us, Murdy was referring to that interconnectedness of risk, because I have data sets now. I can see the interconnectedness between risk that can predict whether or not certain incidents might take place in the business. And so the value for us is we're starting to jump in and predict things before they might happen and try and get in a bit earlier. So, but we would never have been in that position 10 years ago. I mean, there's just no way. So it is quite amazing now with the data and where that data is taking us, and the conversations that we're having around how that can support us with safeguarding and safety and business is really exciting.
Yeah, it is. That's really powerful and a really tangible outcome that you can see from the transformation. Has anybody else using predictive analysis within your organizations? Are you finding you're getting more insights from the data from previously?
So I think the data set has to be large enough for predictive analysis to work. That's the fundamental premise. So if there is a lot of historical data, it kind of helps in building champion challenger models and trying to predict what might happen. In this regard, we see across the financial services industry that credit models have advanced because there's a lot of data available. Operational risk models have been constrained to some extent by the richness of data, which was solved partly with data providers and people and organizations sharing data so that we could have that richness of data to do predictive analysis. So I think at this stage, it is the preserve of the large financial services providers who have access to those data sets and can implement predictive models. And not just regional, but they're like global models that we can start predicting where the next event would occur and type of event could occur and where the winds of change move. So if we start seeing a particular kind of event occurring in a certain geography, we know that this will be followed by a similar event in another geography or jurisdiction. So that gives us a forewarning as to what to bolster up and start predicting. However, that data set or that richness of data is not available to all players in the financial services landscape and does create, I would say, a bit of a lopsided position for us to play in when everybody's not on an even keel. So that's the predictive end, but that does not preclude the fact that we, by scanning the environment and knowing what's happening globally, we can start preparing and understanding what and how our processes and products and structures would react to such events playing out. And so therefore what we do is that end of the spectrum.
Right. Okay.
And
Interesting.
And I think if you combine that with scenario analysis, stress testing, modeling, so that real proactive way of risk management, preparing organisations, for what we know will likely happen. So, that regular practice in the business, not something just done by line two, really supports getting preparedness for the organisation to really handle many situations, many future-facing risks, and things like that. So I think between some of the things discussed by my peers and combining that element, it really sets up organisations to be able to prepare for what is likely going to happen. And we're seeing it more and more with incidents, not just in Australia, but around the world. And, regulators are right on top of it in banking, the likes of CPS 230, resilience and things like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Ansa. So you've touched a little bit there on that preparedness. At Hunter Water, Angela, I'm curious to know, in your opinion, sort of what sets apart a reactive organization and then somebody that is preparing and is planning and more resilient?
I think it's I think it's actually being able to see the story, both what it has been, which will then inform going forward. So, my colleagues have mentioned some of the more technical risk aspects, which are really informative for perhaps certain people in the organisation. But I think it also allows for us to take a very simple story and work with our teams with very direct messaging, where we can tie in the previous world versus what potentially could happen going forward. So I think it allows for us to tailor the communication piece as is required. And that is also tailoring it up. So when we talk to the external regulators, we know that they're looking for a certain angle of information, and we can provide that as part of that transformation.
Excellent. I love that the story that sort of analogy. Has that sort of storytelling and the communications have been really important when you're working directly with some of the communities that Hunter Water are working amongst?
Absolutely. So we've got a great strategy and engagement team here at Hunter Water, and they know, how important it is to understand what our community is needing to understand about our operations. So, they don't just look at risk when we talk to our community, but it is an important part of the communication story that we do have with the local communities.
And taking them on the journey with you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing those particular examples so far. We've touched a little bit on transformation and change. I'd love to dig a little deeper with that, because I think there's some really great nuggets, particularly for our audience at home that might be interested in them. I'm curious to know, and I'm going to ask this question to Elise, what capabilities would you say are the most important when you are going through a transformation?
Yes. Look, how much time have you got? Look, I think it's. I mean, just even the word transformation now starts to make people nervous, and so even that's a debate we're having internally. As you know, should we use that word? But look, I think it's fair to say it absolutely was a transformation for us with the national changes that occurred in our sector. And I really like and can really relate to what Angela was saying around how critical the communication, the messaging, and the storytelling is. And you know, for a large group of stakeholders that these changes were impacting, we needed to really think very carefully around how to the whole organisation to move forward. And we learned a lot along the way. There's certainly things we probably didn't get so right. There's a lot of things we did get right, but we're also still communicating those changes. And importantly, I really like the way Angela says you always bring it back to the strategy, the mission, the vision of your organisation, because that's essentially the heart of why everyone's there. We're there to help people with cerebral palsy. We want a better world for people with cerebral palsy. That comes with great opportunity, but it also comes with great risks. And so it's just being able to distill that and communicate that in a way that is not intimidating. And I think certainly our frontline staff, sometimes risk and compliance is a bit overwhelming, and you know, we need to think about and we've put a lot of effort into the way we communicate about risk and about compliance, and why it's important for us all to understand it and lean into it. But yes, I think no transformation, well, you know, a lot of them fail. I think a lot of them fail because you don't get the front end messaging right. And it seems so simple, but if you can't clearly articulate why you're doing what you're doing, why the change is occurring, what you need people to do, it can get really, really lost. And you then just don't see the benefits realised in your business. And if I was to say there's one thing that we've definitely learnt over the last, particularly 15 years, which has been a significant time of change for us, is the interconnectedness of all of that change, and really starting to manage the messaging from the top down and from the bottom up, and moving away from those siloed communications to a more, you know, integrated frame of reference, because that just and that really has been a great lesson, and that's been the feedback from our front line, sharing the impact this transformation and change has had on them and how we've needed to adjust. So, you know, I know I'm speaking at a very high level, but they're quite fundamental. You know, I find for risk and compliance, unless I can really explain it to the stakeholder in a way that's meaningful for them, whether it's a client, a worker, a board member, I'm not doing my job well. So I find a lot of what I do is thinking about how best to communicate and help people understand, you know, what the risks and compliance issues are. And we have, I mean, the final thing I'd say, we've introduced what we call practice learning and practice communication. So we have a loop through to our frontline staff now, particularly if there's a major incident. And we had one quite recently where there were some key learnings. We were able to lean in and look at particular processes or practices that weren't as strong as they needed to be. I felt that it required a communication straight away to all our frontline where that would be relevant information. So it's a real, without going into the detail of the situation for the particular individuals, we're still able to pull up and say, this is something that happened. It's an event that was not great. Here's what we've learnt. Here's what we need you all to do. And here's when we need you all to do it. And we've had a great response to that. And then we invite people to come to a community of practice, which is online, where people can then share those experiences. So I think that's been something for us, is that it's one thing to be reporting to your regulator and explaining what you're doing, but it's actually a really important loop back to the hundreds of employees that are trying to do a great job there in the real world, and getting that information to them in real time. So again, it's a communication piece, but it's communication and I think unless you're a learning organisation and recognize that you're constantly learning and constantly needing to think about ways to help everyone learn those lessons, your job's never done, really.
Thank you, Elise. It sounds like you're doing a wonderful job at CPA, bringing the front line in and making sure that everybody is clear with what's happening. And that messaging, that shared language is so crucial. And you can see in that those particular real life examples, how it has increased engagement and that constant sort of improvement mindset as well. Anta, at Police Bank, with your frontline, have you seen or done any particular things around engagement?
Absolutely. I think, look, I concur for a lot of what's been said, but I think breaking down silos, breaking down, risk and compliance as, bad words in the organisation. So really having that mindset where we are one team. The business themselves are the risk owners, the risk experts, but talking in a language they understand. So, part of what we do is shadow the business to understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, which Elise touched on, and things like that. And I think working towards common purpose, common strategy, common goals really helps everyone to understand how fundamental they are to the importance of running the bank, serving members, but without them sort of being front of mind and thinking it's a add-on task, managing risks as they go along.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Meti, within your organisation, could you tell me a little bit about sort of keeping in mind some of these sort of changes and bringing in the front line as part of the journey? What does being decision ready mean for Europe Assistance, and how have you been able to achieve that?
It's interesting when we say decision ready, because we have across our organization decisions being made at various levels. So right from a sales and service agent who interacts with the customer to our authorized representatives and partners. And so we have lots of points of interaction with the customers where decisions are made, all the way up to the board where there's oversight and decisions being made at that level. So at every interaction and every point of decision, we need to ensure that we are aligned with community expectations, with our regulation, and managing our risks effectively. So we have a framework that helps ensure that all decision making is set up by authority levels, and our processes are compliant by design, very much to the point that Antor made, that we do not create new structures, but we ensure that the business processes contain within themselves the requirements to be risk effective and meet regulation. So that decision making, so that interactions become easy, seamless, and we manage risks in a decision ready manner. As we go up the hierarchy and we build these pathways into governance, we have, like we touched upon, the risk appetite, which sets the guardrails within which we operate as management, and for our shareholders and the board to be comfortable that we are making decisions which are set up and within the appetite set for the management. So I think there are various structures we use, but at the end of the day, the trick is that it is seamless for the user and it does not stick out as a risk function or a risk premise that they're trying to deal with, but making sure that the customer is at the center of everything we do, yet we are doing it in a safe and robust manner.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Murty.
Thank you.
So sort of reflecting back on the changes, and I know we might not want to use the word transformation all the time, but there has been some clear transformation within your organizations. Would anybody like to share a particular moment that you're really proud of? Something that you look back on, you're like, that was really successful. Angela, would you like to share?
I think the biggest moment for me was to actually see the annual risk review move from an Excel spreadsheet to a platform that allowed transparency and easy sharing of information. I think it was a very exciting time, and it wasn't just for the annual risk review, but in many other areas of risk and compliance. And I felt that was, a wonderful achievement.
Yeah, brilliant. Would anybody else like to share any key moments or tangible examples?
I'm happy to share.
There's many to share, Catherine.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
There you go, Liz.
Okay. I mean, one thing, I suppose it does sit in the risk and compliance space, but it's sort of a broader piece for me around really understanding how to provide enough information to leaders to empower them to make decisions. So on that theme of decision making, again, for me, it's a bit of a link to the data. There's a link to the systems that can give you that data, but then being able to provide it in a simple but effective format for leaders to make decisions. So I'm particularly proud of the effort and the progress we've made to develop what I would call our performance scorecards. So we have strategic and operational performance scorecards. They're a combination of what I would say are KPIs and KRIs. But now that we have that information in a really sort of simple, digestible format, it allows us to make decisions at the right time, get very clear on the corrective actions that are required for the organisation or the options that we might need to consider, and then to be sort of feeling confident to make those decisions and put those actions into place. So I've really seen just how that, I think Ankar was sort of referencing it before, really helping our leaders focus on the right information, delivering it to them at the right time, and then making those kind of performance or risk or compliance decisions to get us sort of what we call it, how do we get back to green? It's as simple as that, like you can't always be green. Things are going to be amber, things are going to be red, but I think being able to, I've seen now the entire organisation, we talk about the traffic light, it's a simple system, we all understand it. It really empowers us to focus in and make decisions where we need to make decisions. And that literally can be used from the boardroom to the front line. And so we, as an example of that, our staff use a client risk register, which shows them what the client care risks are and what they need to do and what's green, amber and red, right through to board papers where we're sharing risk information or performance information, green, amber, red. So simple tool, but if you can get the data right, and everyone leans in to use that tool, we're all speaking the same language. And I've definitely seen a real change in real-time decision making with a confidence and speed that I haven't seen before. So I'm really proud of that. But I can't take credit for that, of course. That's been a whole of organisation.
It's a collective. Yeah,
it's a real collective effort, but I'm really, really proud of that for our organisation.
And so you should be. It's wonderful to see how, like you mentioned, that real connection from the front line to the boardroom and that consistency as well. Thank you. Anta, would you like to share from your perspective at Police Bank, building on that?
Yeah, look, I think, especially around risk information, decision ready, I think a quick win and success, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this, is create an environment where staff are comfortable treating issues, incidents as learning opportunities. When you hear the organisation running around talking about root cause, or let's get to the bottom of it, let's learn from this, how can we do better for the bank, better for our customers, you really know something's working, and the foundations are working, and things are really working. So, and if I just reflect on, I suppose, decision-ready risk information, we focus on, besides keeping things simple, three key things, and Murty and Elise and everyone's touched on it: clarity, context, and implication. So really, what is the issue? Is it clearly articulated? From a context perspective, do we understand the issue? What's driving the issue, the root causes, things like that, and implications around, potential impact and, required action, growing together, becoming a better organisation, and learning from those types of things.
Excellent. I love that. Clarity, context, and implications. That's brilliant. And there's definitely been a theme today from everybody about that, the learning side of things as well, and how that's a continual process, and taking the front line on that journey with you is so key, is so important. Okay, so sort of coming towards the end of the conversation, obviously the environment is going to continue to change and evolve, and there's many emerging risks, which we've touched on a little bit today, like geopolitical risks. Regulations, of course, are going to continue to change. Technological change, we haven't even touched on AI yet, but we know it's there. Predictive is sort of coming. So I'm really keen to know how you will all continue to be responsive and continue to adapt and have your pulse on. So your finger on the pulse with those changes. Murty, would you like to kick off?
Sure. So the way we're going about it is, rather than use the euphemism breaking silos, we're connecting silos through accountability. And we are driving insights to help oversight. So, and that is across the organization. And once we believe we do this, and we are progressing towards that, we find much better understanding of interconnected risks, and also how obligations or regulations plays into ensuring our customers are safe and our processes are robust. So that's really helped us clarify what and how we're going about things. And that's been the kind of foundational direction that the leadership at our organization is moving with.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bertie. That's great. Would anybody like to expand on that or add to that?
Look, I think we've really touched on it throughout this whole panel discussion, but really keeping focus on it, really making sure that things which are happening on the front line flow through all the way through management, executives, through the board, but not everything and anything. So really making sure that the right signals and the right information flows through, absolutely interconnectedness, those types of risks important. We're not managing silos, we're not managing one risk now. It's really making sure the foundations and the systems are set up to capture it all, understand how the business is placed. But, as it flows through management and executive and board, the right information, which everyone's touched on, so you can make the right decisions and know where you stand.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been really interesting to hear how it's not just the systems, it's the human element as well that's helping to bring all that information together and is feeding into that holistic view of what's happening. Brilliant. Well, thank you all for your contributions and insights. It's been really fascinating to hear. I'm sure that the audience at home have been busy making notes and will have a few key ideas and takeaways that perhaps they would like to apply within their organizations. But before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts for our audience at home? Any sort of tips for people that might be navigating similar journeys or about to embark on similar journeys? Angelo, I'd like to start with yourself, if you don't mind.
So the first thing that comes to my mind is be brave and do it. It's going to take a lot of work, but to continue staying in your old model, you just won't see the value long term. So you have to put a line in the sand and say, whatever that date is, this is when we make that change. And it is about the change management process to bring people along on that, version 1 to version 2, but you just have to do it.
Thank you. Be brave. Elise, would you like to go next?
Yeah, no, I love that, Angela. Definitely having courage is an important value for our organisation as well. But yeah, for me, I think fundamentally staying, keeping your vision and your mission and your purpose as the North Star. And that just really helps people understand why you're doing what you're doing. And I don't think I would have seen as much change in the sort of risk and compliance space unless I'd stayed very close to why are we all here and how does that link to all this kind of GRC stuff that you don't really want to know about. It's so true, and I think everyone's touched on it in different ways today, is that we're all responsible for managing the quality, the customer, the risk in the business. But it's taking the time and effort to translate that back to the reason you exist in the first place and the purpose you have as an organisation. And I just feel that it just brings people along for the journey with you if you can translate that well. And it sounds easy. Sometimes it's actually not really easy to do. You've really got to put some effort in, particularly if it's a system change that's really painful, or we had disability support practitioners who never used a computer ever in their jobs. We now have disability support practitioners who put their incident reports online in a 24/7 system that can get to me straight away, real time. Like that, massive change. It can happen if people understand, why are we doing it all in the first place. So that would be my tip: get your comms right and stay focused on your strategy and your objectives and your vision, and help people understand how that links to GRC. I think is the key. Yeah.
Thanks, Elise. I think that purpose is really crucial, and you've articulated that really well at what you're doing at CPA. Thank you. Murty?
Yeah, so being a travel insurer who has its DNA in assistance, I think for us it's keeping it simple, keeping it clear, and keeping our customers safe. So that is our true north that we aim for in everything we do, and that keeps us in good stead and has done so for 65 years. So that's what the organization keeps doing.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And Antar?
Thanks. All very good advice. I've been taking notes, but look, above and beyond, besides making sure roles, responsibilities are understood, I think sometimes in risk management, more can actually become less. We're all guilty of it, producing lots of reporting, but it doesn't always translate into clearer insights. So I think with data and reporting, I think when risk insight is clearer and more focused, decision making becomes easier and actually faster. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Ant. I love that. More becomes less. We should have that on our dashboards. Well, thank you all, and thank you for those at home for listening to the panel.